We all know that social media platforms are designed to keep our attention. They're designed to keep us staying on their platform and engaged as long as possible. I don't want that. I'm sure you don't want that either. We'd rather spend time creating and making ourselves versus just consuming content that others made. Sure, I want to consume the content on Twitter, but I don't want to be consumed by Twitter itself. I want to be intentional with my usage. I want to go there deliberately for a specific purpose and then leave when I'm done. By being intentional with my choices and deliberate in my actions, I will be able to spend more time with my friends and my family and creating my own content to spread out into the world. Today, I want to share with you the single change that I made that makes being intentional with Twitter so much easier and still enjoyable. Through this one change, I was able to keep all the enjoyment of using Twitter while reducing my time spent on Twitter itself to a fractional amount of the time. If you don't want to watch the rest of the video, that's fine. I'll just tell you right now, use Twitter lists. Consume Twitter only through the lists. Jump ahead if you just want to get straight to the details on how I use Twitter now. Otherwise, let me give you a little bit my background and history and usage of Twitter and the struggles I had with it. I created my first Twitter account in 2007 to follow live bloggers for Apple events. Within a couple of years, I was following tons of people and spending way more time on the platform than I wanted to. I was a Twitter completionist. Twitter soon became a distraction from the things that were really important to me. Realizing this, I took the easy way out. I deleted my account. But after that first experience, I was hooked. So I recreated my account in 2011, and you know what? I've been struggling with the same issues that I originally struggled with ever since. I didn't permanently solve my problem with how I used Twitter. I would go to Twitter with the intent to check on something, say the latest Apple news, and I would get distracted by something like Star Wars and end up spending a whole bunch of time there for something that I didn't really want to in the first place. Come 2020, when I was beginning to write my thesis, I knew this had to change. I was gonna be spending way too much time writing my thesis in a short amount of time that I didn't want to jeopardize time with my family or friends at the expense of that. And so Twitter had to go. Except I had already learned from my first experience that that was not sufficient because I still love Twitter. So I need to do something different. I need to be intentional in how I use Twitter so that I could say, hey, I want to go to Twitter to check on this topic and then pretty much be accountable and not be trapped by the feed into looking at something else. And to do that, I use Twitter lists. In my opinion, Twitter lists are the single best feature of Twitter, but they're also the one that is most underused. Most people who do know of Twitter lists tend to think of them as just a collection of people. Like it might be something you go to a conference and then all the conference attendees are added to a single Twitter list so you can check on everybody throughout the conference, and then you just kind of forget about it and open up Twitter, and 5 years later you say, oh, hey, look, there's a list of people from Dub in 2015. Let's delete that. Instead, I want you to think about Twitter lists as an alternate feed, okay, an alternate main timeline. So now, instead of a single timeline of all the people that you follow, you have an unlimited number of timelines in the form of lists. This is great and phenomenal for productivity and intentional use of social media. I suggest that you start by creating a couple of lists of things that you are really interested in. My first list was a group of Apple commentators who I really liked. Then, whenever I wanted to check on the latest news and opinions of Apple, I would just open that list instead of my main feed. I would not get dragged into hearing the latest stuff about Star Wars or any of my other interests. Instead, I would just be focused on the task and the reason that I went into Twitter in the first place. And that is the best thing you can do if you don't want to get hooked by social media. And so like I said, early 2020, I started to use lists. It didn't come to a real head though until July 2020 when I decided, you know, I'm gonna unfollow everyone. And so if you look at my Twitter account right now, you'll see I have 0 followers. Instead, I moved every single person into one or more lists so that I would be forced to use Twitter through lists only. And you wanna know what? That experiment proved to be so incredibly beneficial. Now, every time I was using Twitter, I was forced to be intentional. I was forced to choose what area or what interest I was looking into at that time and go into it and check up things and just leave it when I was done. And this is really important to me because, like I said before, I don't want to give up Twitter. There are tons of people that I love on there that I want to hear their latest thoughts and opinions, but I value my time working on my own creative hobbies or time spent with my wife and my 5 children far more than time spent with other people on Twitter. And so by being intentional and deliberate, I reduced the amount of time I spent on Twitter and I increased the amount of time I had for my own hobbies or my family. Now that I've proved to myself that this can work, and not only can it work, but it does work and it works really, really well, I've decided that I'm gonna start following more people again on my main timeline. And I'll admit to you, it's kind of an embarrassing and awkward reason. I wanna start putting myself out there more. Besides these videos, I wanna start tweeting more. I wanna start writing on my blog more. And as silly as it sounds, you know, like anyone else, I want a large number of subscribers on YouTube. I want a large number of followers on Twitter. And frankly, I think it just provides a better look to new people looking to follow me on Twitter if I follow other people. And for that reason, I've decided to just start treating that following list as another list in Twitter. I'm not exactly sure what it'll become, but I'm thinking at this moment that pretty much anyone who makes their way onto one of my lists will also be my follower count, and I'll just primarily consume Twitter through lists like I did in the past. Because now I've proved to myself that that is a possible experience, it is an enjoyable experience, and above all, it is a beneficial experience to both my creative outlets as well as to my family and those around me. So if you're big into Twitter, I highly suggest that you make a couple of topical lists, and if you're really worried about how much time you're investing in these social media platforms and you want to be more intentional with them yourselves, I challenge you. For the next 30 days, I want you to create a number of topical lists and only go and interact with Twitter through those lists. Please let me know in the comments below if this is something you're gonna try, or any other tips that you have for being more intentional with social media. And just otherwise, just let me know what you thought about this video. How can I improve it? I look forward to making more content that will be helpful and informative, as well as just entertaining for you. So until next time, bye.